Hi, Lucy. Lucy, how are you?
Hello, colleagues, and welcome to our webinar. My name's Lucy Slack. I'm the Deputy Secretary General of CLGF, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you here today for this session on local economic development as a driver of trade in the Commonwealth. And this is a gathering of colleagues from across the African continent, and we're very, very happy to have you with us. I just want to say a couple of words about the things that we're going to be focusing on in our discussions today. You'll all have seen from the paper that we've circulated and also from the summary of the event that we're going to be asking four kind of key questions today. One is around how local government, both central and state and provincial level government, can foster more strategic linkages between local economic development and trade internationally. We want to look at the kind of mechanisms that are needed to ensure greater inclusion of local government stakeholders in the national trade and economic development agenda. And we're interested to understand better what local government associations can, can do to support local businesses and ensure that they're better integrated international value chains around trade and investment. And how can we be sure that local economic development plays a central role in the post-COVID-19 recovery process? So I think we've set ourselves a fairly ambitious agenda. I think we've got a great paper from which to work. And before I hand over to our very august panel, I just want to give a couple of very short housekeeping announcements, really. So the first is to request everybody to kind of keep your computers and your phones on mute when you're not speaking, just so that we can minimize the amount of background noise that we get for our speakers so that they can concentrate. And I think the second thing is really to say that we want this to be a really interactive event. So I would encourage you throughout the seminar to use both the chat function at the bottom of your screen and also the Q&A function so that you can ask questions. And what we will then do is ensure that those questions are relayed to the chair so that the chair can ask them of our panelists and we can create a dialogue with the panel. So without further ado, I'm very honored to hand over to CLGF's chairperson, Reverend Mpo Morikagomo, who's going to give us some welcoming remarks. Reverend Mpo.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Mr. Secretary General, Dr. Greg, dear colleagues, on behalf of the CLGF, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar on local economic development as a driver of trade in the Commonwealth. As local government practitioners in Africa, we are increasingly seeing the importance of local government role in supporting and facilitating local economic development. Even though local economic development is often not a statutory responsibility of local government, we have a significant responsibility to support our communities and their livelihoods by integrating an economic perspective into our development planning, by ensuring an enabling environment for business in our communities, and by supporting and nurturing small business and entrepreneurship. In many ways, the COVID-19 crisis has reinforced the importance of local economic development. It has equally put immense pressure on economies already affected by the slowdown in globalization and global trade. Through program support by DFID UK and EU in Africa, Asia and the Caribbean and the Pacific, CLGF has been working on understanding and strengthening national and subnational value chains through a focus on local government and local economic development as a strategy for poverty reduction and creating more inclusive local economies, taking a wider perspective and thinking about local government's role as an integral part of the state. This means it's also important to locate this in the wider macroeconomic perspective of the nation, of the country. Here in Botswana, CLGF has been working with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development and Botswana Association of Local Authorities in helping a number of local authorities to develop a local economic development strategies. And most of these are at the final stage, and they've done value chain analysis of resources and profiling resources found in their areas. On the 9th, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Botswana, in the State of the Nation address, he did allude to this. And you can see now this is being placed at the center of economic recovery, as well as in the purview of local authorities in Botswana. The work that's been done by CLGF here in Botswana also culminated in the formulation of a national local economic development framework, which the President has emphasized in the State of the Nation address that it should be implemented as a measure of recovery given the COVID-19 challenges, and also to energize the local economies and ensure that local communities can be assisted to really look at their production and consumption patterns and produce and refashion their economies in such a secular fashion that they can be able to support the local businesses. During the lockdown, it was in Botswana, it was literally difficult to get anything across because we import what we get mostly from South Africa and the neighboring countries, but at the same time, most of the production is not necessarily done within the proximity and in a secular fashion. And this, we believe, is the Botswana government will lend LED approach and impetus. Based on the experience from our programs, we have looked at where local economic development sits in terms of supporting national and increasingly Commonwealth trade. You will all have received, read the report, the paper, authored by Vijay, which draws on the experience of CLGF members in this regard. This paper highlights the importance of LED that meets the needs of the cross-section of the economic actors that we find in our cities, towns, and villages, many of whom are operating in the informal sector. It also emphasizes the need for policy coherence and better institutional linkages between local and national government to ensure LED strategies are deployed to open up value chains and enable stakeholders to participate in strategic sectors and benefit from international trade agreements. This will not only be crucial to localizing delivery of Agenda 2030 and sustainable development goals, but also play a central role in the post-COVID-19 recovery, but as well as bring together all other actors. You will remember in the Addis Ababa agenda that we did amplify the need to build partnerships and coalitions, including with the private sector. For instance, here in Botswana, one of the banks, I won't mention the name here because I may be acting on marketing for them, but they have developed, they have come up with a department specific to LED, and they would like to finance the LED programs and fund them, and where they need to loan the money, do so. When done and well and responsibility, when done well and responsibly, LED is not an alternative to international trade, but it is a building block to underpin national or regional development. Local government has the governance structures and community leadership role to shape institutional relations and make policy and enabling business environment and enable business in a broadest form. And working with national government can create the conditions to foster local economic development that directly supports national economic policies. I'm going to hand over now to Vijay to talk to us through this paper, and then we have a diverse and experienced panel of speakers who will each reflect on local economic development and trade from their varied perspectives. The purpose of this meeting is, of course, to share experiences and to learn from each other, essentially to start to validate our findings. I would like to urge you to participate actively. Please, you'll be able to participate as Lucy has guided earlier on. Please press the question and answer function on the screen to contribute to what I hope will be a rich and a full discussion. Now, Vijay, I hand over to you to talk to the paper and moderate some of the discussions. I thank you, colleagues. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Reverend. And good morning or good afternoon, colleagues, depending on where you're joining us from on the continent. This is also an opportunity to welcome colleagues from across the Commonwealth who are also listening in. My name is Vijay Krishnarayan, and I've been asked to facilitate this session. It's an important session because it happens to land in the midst of Entrepreneurship Week. This is a particular priority for the Commonwealth, but I think this is a unique contribution. This seminar is a unique contribution that the Commonwealth Local Government Forum can make to the Commonwealth effort as a whole. It's important because it locates entrepreneurship in a broader context. It acknowledges that to enable entrepreneurship, a multiplicity of actors are required to make things happen. And importantly, local government is situated at the heart, given its mandate, but also its position in understanding and highlighting the particular challenges posed in any context. We're very lucky today to be joined by three august speakers who will be responding to the paper that I present. The three speakers bring unique perspectives from different vantage points, whether it's from senior officials, a kind of technician's perspective, whether it's from an entrepreneur's perspective, or whether it's from the local government political perspective. Each of those will converge, and we'll bring those together during the course of the session. There are 5 parts to the session. I'll present the paper, which I think we can probably put in the group chat so that you can access it. You'll be relieved to hear, colleagues, that I won't be talking you through every dot and comma of the 19 pages of the report, but rather highlighting some of the key issues. We'll then have the responses from the 3 panelists, and they'll be, following their responses, an opportunity to take questions from you using the chat function or raising your hands using the Zoom facility. And then we'll have some key takeaways. I'll return to the 3 panelists for their 3 key takeaways, because what we want to do is to use this as an opportunity to frame recommendations that build on the findings of the report that we've produced. And then we'll close with some words from our colleagues at the Local Government Forum. So perhaps we'll then go on to present the paper. Xavi, I wonder if you could put the presentation up so we can start. So the paper builds on the Commonwealth Local Government Forum's body of work. It's a considerable body of work. This is not, local economic development is not the latest fashion for the Commonwealth Local Government Forum. It initiated a programme 10 years ago, and what the paper has provided an opportunity to do is to take stock of the distance travelled by the Local Government Forum and its partners and stakeholders in shaping a local economic development discourse. The paper comes at an important time, a time when we're re-evaluating globalisation, when we're recognising the opportunities that technology poses to realise how value can become apparent. Technology is disrupting global value chains, helping us to reassess where value is actually added in a value chain, and that is sparking new conversations about how we should view local economic development. And of course, as has been hinted in the comments so far today, we're beginning to look at what a post-COVID economic recovery might look like. And increasingly, I think there's a recognition that central government or any one actor doesn't hold all the cards. This is going to require a number of actors, and local economic development provides an opportunity for us to think about post-COVID recovery in a local sense. The paper argues that if the potential of local economic development to bring home the benefits of trade are going to be realised, then strategies need to address a number of things. They need to address policy and institutional coherence. What do we mean by that? What we mean is we need to align central government institutions and regional and local institutions and the concomitant policy frameworks. They need to be pulling in the same direction. We need to be able to look at value chains and understand them. We need to be mapping value chains to understand exactly where value is being added, to see whether the opportunities and the stakeholders can be aligned to realize value locally. We need a particular focus on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly with an eye on inclusion. We've hinted at the importance and relevance of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'll talk a bit about those a little later on. But the chorus that repeats itself throughout the SDG discourse is inclusive development. And if we're going to realize inclusive development, a particular priority on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises is required to ensure that women and young people in particular are visible and benefiting and participating. I think there is, of course, a role to play for municipalities and cities. This is not to say that rural development is irrelevant in a local economic development context, but I think what we're saying in the paper is that cities provide a particular, have a particular catalytic role, and not just capital cities either. Next slide, please. The context is a patchwork of threats and opportunities. And when we look at the Commonwealth frame, we can see that there is an increased appetite to engage in the trade discourse, certainly since 2016. This Commonwealth effort has focused on the institutional arrangements, looking at the ways in which public policy can be better framed to be inclusive, to help nations realize trade benefits. And if you look at some of the Commonwealth publications, Commonwealth Secretariat's publications, Trade Hot Topics, and its annual reviews of trade, I can highly commend them, colleagues. They're authoritative and timely commentaries on trade contexts. The Commonwealth is also more willing to deploy its convening power, bringing together ministers at particular forums. I think over the past 4 years, we've seen Commonwealth trade ministers come together more than they have done in the prior 20 years on trade. And that's a particular opportunity for us to advance a local economic development agenda. There's also a willingness on the part of the Commonwealth to mobilise its various moving parts. And the Commonwealth is much more than the Commonwealth Secretariat, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, Commonwealth Women and Enterprise Investment Council, the Commonwealth Business and Business Women's Network. These are all elements of the Commonwealth machinery that can be brought together to good effect. The Commonwealth Local Government Forum is standing on firm ground on its work on trade. We could have that next slide, please, Savi. The point of departure for the Commonwealth Local Government Forum is the Aberdeen Agenda, which is the Commonwealth's definitive statement on the importance of local democracy and institutions. The CLGF LED discourse has been shaped by its members, as with everything that the Commonwealth Local Government Forum does. And this is rooted in CLGF's focus on developmental local government. It's a recognition that local institutions are central to delivering on development. And this means going beyond making sure that its essential or statutory obligations are met. Local government has a central role in coordinating and strengthening multiple stakeholders. The next slide, please. As we talk about development frameworks, we remind ourselves that we're entering the what's called the decade of delivery. We refer back to Agenda 2030. And we look to locate the connection between LED and trade in the SDGs. And there are pluses and minuses in doing so. We can acknowledge from the get-go that that local government is features throughout the SDG agenda, whether it's on SDG 6 in relation to water and sanitation, SDG 9 on the provision of infrastructure, on SDG 11 on urbanization, or SDG 8 on creating economic growth and jobs. You'll see a sprinkling of local government across the SDG agenda. But trade remains an outlier within the SDG agenda. You have to look quite hard in the SDG agenda to find references to trade. They're buried in SDG 17. And there the focus is on trade liberalization rather than any fuller discourse on enabling stakeholders to participate in trade. On the other hand, the SDG agenda does remind us of the importance of resilience, and it's brought resilience back into the development discourse. I think it's important that we locate the localization of trade opportunities in that context of and discourse of resilience. But with all development frameworks, they come with a health warning. They must be properly situated in contexts, and they are not by themselves panaceas. They're not going to solve all of our problems unless they're contextualized and melded and bent to the particular local context. And that again highlights the importance of local economic development as an agent, as a developmental agent. Next slide, please. I mentioned the importance of cities in my introduction. They're important focal points that warrant particular attention because this is where value is added. I talked a bit about mapping value chains. Any mapping of value chains will tell you that it's in cities where value primarily is added, but not just capital cities. So national policies can tend to overstate the importance of capital cities, and that's not taking anything away from the importance of those, but there are other urban centres as well that need to feature in a proper consideration of the role of municipalities in delivering on and opening up value chains for local stakeholders. But if we're going to realise that potential of cities, the paper argues that trade capacity needs to be developed. And when we talk about capacity development, we're not just talking about the provision of training. We need to understand that the capacity development for better participation of cities in trade starts with a basic awareness of trade regimes and the way in which trade works, but it also requires municipalities to look at their assets, their resources, their networks. It's all part of developing the capacity of municipalities to participate more fuller as conveners in a trade discourse, looking beyond their statutory mandates. Can I have the next slide, please? It's important that we also focus on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. These are the mainstays of many African Commonwealth economies, and we need to map the ways in which they engage with value chains and therefore where the opportunities for particular interventions may lie. But we also need to get the balance right. This is the big question for municipalities, how we get the balance right between regulating micro, small and medium-sized enterprises and enabling them. And one of the findings of the paper is that up to this point, the emphasis has been on regulating, on dealing with micro enterprises in particular as nuisances, rather than placing them in a broader context where they can be, yes, regulated so that basic standards are observed, but enabled and facilitated so that we bring a broader swathe of the population into economic development. In conclusion, next slide, please. in conclusion, we can say that local economic development is an idea whose time has come again. But it does need to be contextualized. We need proof of concept. A lot of the discourse, a lot of the writing on local economic development has emanated from the global north. And we need more experiences, more thinking about the way in which local economic development can work from the global south. We also need to recognise the potential of the Commonwealth as a convener and understand the ways in which we can deploy that convening power in favour of cities and micro, small and medium-sized enterprises as agents of local economic development that realises trade benefits for all. Colleagues, that's the paper in summary. I'm now going to move us on to the respondents. I mentioned that we have 3 panelists who are joining us from different vantage points. Will be sharing their expertise and perspectives from different vantage points. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce first Adams Tommy, who is a senior economist with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development in Sierra Leone. Adams has 19 years of experience on economic and fiscal policy making. He's got a master's from Njala University. He's a doctoral candidate at the moment, and currently a project manager on the World Bank initiative on public finance improvement in Sierra Leone. Adams is going to share his perspectives on the role of government in strengthening value chains across the country, insights on mechanisms that leverage local government as an agent in local economic development, and help us to understand how, in practical terms, local government can help business to play its part. Adams, please. You've got 7 minutes, Adams. I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Thank you. Thanks on the side, like the chairperson for the program has stated. I will give them a Sierra Leone experience or the Sierra Leone situation in terms of linkage between LED and trade and a couple of other issues you've mentioned. And where I will start is fostering strategic linkages between LED and trade. I believe depend on the country context in terms of the nature of economic activities and how diversified the economy is, and also more importantly, how sincere the country is in strengthening its local institutions, you understand, to foster this process. And of course, Sierra Leone is not an exception to this. And the country is advantageous geographically and abundant with abundant mineral resources. A couple of other things that govern Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone is fertile in terms of agricultural land and abundant tourism sectors. We have huge natural resources lying down out there. But notwithstanding, the economy is also highly vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. With all this, we as a country have not actually done enough to harness the potential to meet the growing demand for jobs from the youth population and significantly improve service delivery in our local jurisdictions. Well, thanks to the government's decentralization program that commenced in 2004, that has, to a large extent, given some reasonable powers and responsibilities to our local authorities for promoting development of the localities with the resources at their disposal and those resources they could mobilize from other partners. But as a government, there is the critical need to boost competitiveness of growth sectors such as agribusiness and services to create jobs and generate labor income as a sustainable pathway for inclusive growth. With all this, to address some of these challenges we are facing, I mean, the country we have a huge natural resources in so many areas, but the country hasn't done much actually to tap that potential for its people to benefit from it. So to address those challenges, the government was skillful to place economic diversification at the center of its medium-term development program 2019 to 2023. Of course, we know diversification is key to building a resilient economy, and doing so requires some significant improvement in the business environment, as we've been seeing, as well as public and private sector investment to improve productivity for alternative sectors. Well, the government, through the support of the World Bank, has supported this initiative as rooted from the development plan, with some $40 million project on economic diversification projects. It's currently being supported by the World Bank to address some of these issues. The project is a 4-year project that deals with business environment and capacity building, SMEs, entrepreneurs. There are also other existing World Bank projects, funded projects that involve linkages, that involves linking LED and trade. There is an existing smallholder commercialization and agribusiness projects that supports agribusiness farmer linkages and SMEs along agriculture value chain, market access improvement, capacity building support for state and non-state institutions and producer organizations. Also, there is an agro-processing competitiveness project estimated at 10 million for a period of 4 years. But the broad objectives of this World Bank projects generally are to strengthen SMEs' access to finance, set up supporting and equipping business training centers for SMEs, strengthen knowledge, skills, and capacity of SMEs, entrepreneurs in business, and creating the enabling environment for development, growth, and expansion of SMEs. However, my fear has been in all these projects, the extent to which local councils are used as trusted intermediaries and or to play integral part in the execution of these projects, you understand, it remains unclear. I mean, that's key with all these World Bank supported projects, but we've not seen the extent to which local councils or local authorities have actually participated in the design of those projects and the extent to which they will be used to foster, you understand, development using this window. But notwithstanding, again, other strides have been made by the government as articulated in their policy statements on the roles played by local government stakeholders to support SME, hence enhance national trade. For instance, in the fiscal year 2020 budget speech states that only persons, there is a provision in the fiscal year 2020 budget that states only persons, SMEs that are permanently resident should be entitled to bids for contracts not exceeding $50,000. Again, how effective this was implemented since in this year could not be easily, you understand, determined. So despite, I mean, projects, World Bank projects are on, but the council's participation is minimal, government still believes that local authorities have a key role to play to foster LEDNs to promote trade. But thanks to the existing CLGF pilot project implemented in 4 councils, that is succeeding, I would say succeeding, to ensure councils implement a margin of preference provision. This is a key provision in the NPP Act to protect local businesses so that they gain resources from their localities. And the benefit bids for works and local contractors, or for benefit of bids for domestically produced goods. CLGF has been doing pilot in 4 councils just to ensure local authorities gain this authority and foster, creating the environment so that businesses gain access to finance, SMEs in their localities, and enhance trade. But notwithstanding, the economy is also highly, okay, yeah, that's it. And services. So the pilot project is encouraging all councils to adopt the model as a way to support local businesses. Like I'm saying, yeah, there are government initiatives, you understand, LED in promoting trade. But at the same time, World Bank funded projects have not captured, you understand, have not made provision so that local authorities are more involved. And that's where the money sits. I've named just 3 World Bank projects that runs to up to $100 million. That is geared to creating some form of finance to SMEs to enhance development, to bolster trade. but the extent to which the local authorities are involved in this is still questionable. But the government, on the other hand, with its own resources, is actually trying to ensure the local councils play a key role, you understand, in supporting LED. One key challenge has been for most local councils. Well, I would say they've been implementing some form of LED projects, but it's not anchored in the act, because LED is a concept. For most of our localities, what I see them implementing is social development, focusing on poverty-related sectors. If we are talking about local economic development, instruments that will create jobs that will lead to development. And that's the aspect that is actually still missing in Sierra Leone. Pilot projects have been championed by UNDP but have not succeeded. LED polling drafted but not passed in cabinet. So as a country, actually, we are still yet to, I won't say understand the concept of LED, but actually incorporate LED issues into our structures, both at national and subnational level, so that it makes a difference. In fact, there is currently the EU budget support for Sierra Leone for 2020, 2021, it's keen to ensure local authorities play a very, very key role, you understand, in terms of integrating local governments into government programs so that they foster development along those lines. So in a nutshell, that's what I have for now. When issues will come, the questions will come, I'll take it.
Thank you, Mr. Tommy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for highlighting the importance of strategy, central government strategy, and the need for specific mechanisms to include local government in programme and policy development. I'm going to move us on to our second speaker, Maureen Sumbwe, who is the chairperson of the COMESA Federation of Associations of Women in Business. And Maureen's also the CEO of the Zambia Federation of Associations of Women in Business. Maureen has 19 years of experience in business development and has helped to frame and form policy development in Zambia on micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. And she also played a role in establishing Zambia's first all-women bank. Maureen's going to talk to us a little bit about the main challenges facing micro, small and medium-sized enterprises in getting access to value chains. She's also going to bring a gender lens to that, but also she'll highlight the role of local, national and regional institutions in helping to realise the benefits of local economic development. Maureen, you have 7 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My response this afternoon is just going to look at the role of SMEs and especially women SME companies, and just to a little bit to the value chain development. So looking at the presentation earlier, we looked at the challenge of regulation versus facilitation. And if I were to add a word there, I would have also included the invisible SMEs. And these are the ones who are at the municipal level. Yes, indeed, it's true that a lot of the value chain emphasis is in the major cities, and yet most of the value chains do start at the municipality level. And this is where I think most of the MSMEs, and I must add the micro, are based. And yet they're still very important players. So some of the challenges that face them have been, as usual, they will talk about the main one, which we have discovered in our work, is that there's while they are very busy producing so many products and across different sectors, they have a problem of access to markets. And so we, in our thinking, have thought that we need to really look at the challenge from two angles. While we are looking at regulating and facilitating for the MSMEs, we also need to look at access to markets. And this I heard what I consider to be a very wise saying in relation to farmers. Someone said to a group of farmers that I was sitting with one day, don't grow and sell, grow to sell. So the most important part is to finding the market for these people. And this is really how we are looking at developing value chains, starting at the local level and going all the way up to the really top of the value chains. We also have the challenge of access to resources, and access to resources is not really always about financial resources. We need to look at resources much broader term. And one of these challenges has always been that particularly women do not have access to land. And so at municipal level, it is possible to start addressing this challenge. We really think that this can be achieved when the municipality, the local governments start to work much closer with central government, because we have a disconnect sometimes where, for example, in this country, the central government, the office of the president, has declared that whenever land is being allocated, at least 30% should set aside for women to access that land as a productive resource. So where does the municipality come in? The local government. The local government comes in to ensure that when they are the ones who hold the land, actually the municipalities. So when they are allocating land, are they looking at it through a gender lens, or are they just giving land because Mr. So-and-so arrived? And so there's a need to address that disconnect in the sharing of resources, including land as a productive resource. We also have the issue of access to finance. Access to finance becomes even more difficult for women entrepreneurs, because when they need to get finances, they have to produce collateral, which is usually in the form of a title deed to some land that they own, which they do not own because they have not been given that land. So it is like a chain reaction, and we really need to be looking at all these. Looking at how do we address this role of, for example, the Federation of Women in Business that I happen to head, or indeed even the COMESA Federation of Women in Business. At a local level, the Federation of Women in Business is a membership-based organization. So we know that at municipal level, there are women's groups that are doing all this work. And so the value chain approach would be to organize these women into clusters. Look at the resource profile of a particular local government and see what is their competitive or comparative advantage and what is it that they can contribute. And we started to do this. We decided to take a particular product, and we decided to take cassava as an example. And we looked at all these issues that I've talked about. We looked, first of all, at the market. So what if they grow the cassava? They've been growing cassava since time immemorial. Where are they going to take it? And we discovered that in the cities where the value chains seem to be the most active is where the need is for this cassava. And we have companies that import 20, 30 metric tons of cassava a week, and they're importing it. And yet we have the people who grow this cassava and they have nowhere to take it. So we started off by making sure that we get a market for the products. And then we went backwards and started to look at how does the cassava start. It starts, of course, with a seed. So we grew a group of women farmers who are seed multipliers. And these seed multipliers have started to sell seed to other farmers who are then producing the cassava as a product and passing it on to the processors. What local governments should then do, I think the missing gap there is that you have to send the product to a more urban setting to process. So local governments can look at empowerment, local empowerment, in the sense that they can even semi-process some of these products at local government level. That means they will create markets for the local farmers, they will create jobs for the unemployed, they will reduce on urbanization, and it will go like that. And so with the cassava value chain, we reached to a stage where, yes, we were able to work up to the urban areas and supply cassava byproducts to the end users. But we discovered, again, because of our connection with the COMESA, Federation of Women in Business, that this is a product that can go right across Africa. And it can reach even the other Commonwealth countries, because cassava is a product that is required in almost every sphere of life. It's the tablets that you drink, it is in confectionery, it is the glue that binds things. You have so many uses. And if you just chose a product like that and decided that you're going to use that for local economic development, you'll find that you have solved a million problems and helped a million lives. And so we are also looking at the local context, the regional context as COMESA, but now we have even a bigger opportunity to feed into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which means that there will be more players, there will be more gaps, there will be more openings and more business linkages. And so in our intervention, I think we are looking to see how we can link with the local governments, the municipalities, tie in the national policies from central government, and still empower the small guys. And these small guys, they need to be organized into clusters. They need to be given the training that they need to be able to upscale, produce more, and produce better. So even in the regulation of it, it's not just about them having a license to manufacture or to make a product. It's also about what is the Bureau of Standards doing to maintain a standard that can be accepted right across regions and across statutory bodies. So it's also about quality assurance and quality control. And all these things need to be tied in and brought together so that we will see the empowerment starting right at the grassroots and growing up through the value chain. That would be my initial response to the paper.
Thank you very much, Maureen. And thanks for highlighting the differential ways in which entrepreneurs access capital and finance, highlighting the particular challenges faced by women. I'm going to turn to our third panelist, Professor Paul Chepkwony, who is the governor of Kericho County. Professor Chepkwony is a chemist by training, has been an academic practiced as an academic at Moi University for 18 years, elected twice as governor of Kericho County with a mandate of 96%. So popular politician will now share his perspectives on the ways in which local economic development has been enabled in Kericho County, highlighting what local and county government can do, and maybe point out some of the mechanisms that are required to realize the involvement of local government in local economic development. Governor, the floor is yours. I understand you're being represented by the Deputy Governor. Deputy Governor, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to join this meeting. My name is Susan Kikwaya, the Deputy Governor of Kericho County, and I have been the Deputy to Professor Paul Chepkwony since 2013. And I'm very pleased to serve the people of Kericho County. My background is an economist and also I have a degree in French and an MBA in international management. Before becoming deputy governor, I was the managing director of Kenya Investment Authority. So this is a subject which is very dear to my heart. But I'd like to focus on the case of Kericho County and what we have done in terms of local economic development as a driver of trade in the Commonwealth. First and foremost, our vision is a prosperous county where residents enjoy a high quality of life in a sustainable environment. This vision of ours dovetails into our national vision. Our tagline is all you can imagine. Due to the recent pandemic, we have decided on widening participation of the local people in terms of economic empowerment. We believe in a bottoms-up approach to intervene on the local needs so that we can have key strategies to create decent jobs where they are most needed. In Kenya recently, we have a national trade policy that supports the entire development of local value chains for products development. And that's in addition to our Kenya industrial policy, which gives us guidance on economic growth rate that is needed for the country so that it can give us more jobs in specific areas. So when you look at that vision, we have 7 sectors in the economic pillar, which is to drive the economy. Coming home to Kericho County, during our first term with the governor, we employed what is known as one ward, one product. We have 30 wards in the county. And so quickly, we realized that we needed the participation of the local people in terms of their own destiny. So we began with what was known as ward investment consultative forums, which was followed by sub-county investment seminars. And eventually we had a Kericho County Investment Conference where all the wards demonstrated the value chain from the soil or the growing of product to the marketing and demonstration of the various value or products that can come out of, let's say, a cottage industry. So we regard cottage industries as the foundation for an enhanced industrialization. So with that in mind, we have had success in demonstration of these value chains, and notably, we have a woman, because now I'm very happy that the previous speaker talked about women and economic empowerment. We have a woman who's already producing sorghum tea, which is used for people with various illnesses and so forth. We have also a ward that produces sweet potatoes, which we have been able to export to England. And we are also looking at that and eventually producing about 13 products out of that. One ward also produces bananas. And we have a very unique ward also in Kericho County because we are mostly tea producing area. This ward is called Chaik, but what we want to do with that ward is to get the banana fiber and make artifacts from banana fiber. So that will contribute to economic empowerment. We also have a ward that is dealing with Kipsigis artifacts. Kipsigis is the main tribe in Kericho County, and we are very proud to be able to sell to the world our products which can be hand woven. So it brings me now to how do we do this? We have partnerships, and I'm glad that the presentation earlier indicated that trade is ingrained in Sustainable Development Goal number 17. So in our partnerships, we have our vocational training centers, which we are doing a policy to ensure that we have home craft centers. The home craft centers will then be able to produce products that can be exported out of Kenya, especially into the US under the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. This program for youths in the vocational training centers has seen us produce over 80,000 youths that have been trained how to be job creators, or they can get employment. But the most important thing is to be job creators. And we have seen 2 ladies become mechanics. So we really want to focus on the cottage industries where employment of 3 to 5 staff are 3 to 10 staff are in those specific industries. So partnerships for us is very, very important, especially in the MSME area. I want to give 2 examples. We have an investor, a local investor, that is doing chicken and is producing the entire chain, where he's using the chicken waste to produce biogas. He's using the chicken waste to produce organic fertilizer. And this couple that is located not too far from our town, also talking about urban industries, produce about 100 trays of eggs per day. With 30 eggs per tray, that's 3,000 eggs per day, which is in high demand, and they cannot cope. So we are assisting them to have others learn from them and do the chicken industry value chain. We also have a very good example of paint producer that has received national awards. These paint producers also are local. So again, that's another example of industrialization that is already taking off in Kericho County. In the coffee sector, we are very proud to have what is known as Women in Coffee, who are fair trade approved. The coffee in Kericho County is of very, very high quality, and we are proud that we have had significant increase in production since we joined this new devolved government in 2013. And that is something that is already at the packaging stage, approved by all the necessary bodies in Kenya in terms of quality, and also approved by fair trade. Another example is a ward that is producing milk and packaging as yogurt, which is sold in the local supermarkets. And again, it is approved by all the necessary bodies in the country. Other opportunities for the local economic development are in housing and infrastructure. We have a university town, and also together with the VTCs, the vocational training centers, we are looking at mushrooming hostels so that the local people can be the investors, and the institutions that teach focus on learning. Alternative energy, we have a solar farm that's coming up that is beginning with 10 megawatt solar, which is going to also feed into the cottage industries, and whatever surplus we have, we'll sell it to the national government. We have a hydro industry project with a local university. In the mining sector, which is the 7th area of specialization in our Vision 2030, we, as Kericho County, we are proud to say that we have gemstones, we have bauxite, which is used in the cement industry, limestone and oil. So we are working on developing these areas so that they can be areas of income generation, particularly for our youth. So concurrently, we are working also with education institutions to ensure that we are going to be developing people who can really work in these industries. In my previous job, I used to call what we are discussing today DDI, domestic direct investment, which is so needed before even foreign direct investment, because they would be able to feed into the larger companies, the multinationals. And with those partnerships means that we are going to be securing livelihoods in Kericho County using local resources and developing also through technologically advanced methods of production. Under our Vision 2030, we say that we want Kenya to be a globally competitive and prosperous nation with a high quality of life. We subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so our governor of Kericho County is committed to seeing that the residents of Kericho County have a different life by the time we leave the office through the various initiatives in the development of local industries, particularly the small-scale industries. Thank you very much. I'll be leaving because I have a funeral to attend. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor Susan Kikwai, for stepping in for the governor. Thanks also for reminding us of DDI and the importance of DDI, domestic direct investment, and the importance of involving young people in local economic development, policy development. Colleagues, we've had a number of questions surfaced in the group chat. I'm going to ask now for the responses of the panelists to some of these questions. We've got a contribution from the Commonwealth Business Women's Network, who would welcome the panel's view on a number of aspects in regard to women's participation in local economic development, gender responsive procurement, women's involvement in innovation hubs, family-friendly work environments and safer cities, as well as women's involvement and participation in the digital economy. The question asks how local government and indeed institutions can do more to support women's participation in those particular aspects. And I'd ask the panelists to think about that. There's a specific question for Maureen. Maureen, did the women that you were working with, how did the women that you were working with actually get access to markets? What were the practical considerations? In Botswana, there are challenges of locally manufactured goods penetrating the local market because there's a preference for imports. How do women come to terms with that or counter that that bias? So, Maureen, perhaps I'll start with your response to that question about the experience of women penetrating the market in Botswana.
Thank you very much. We faced, and in certain areas we are still facing, that the preference for foreign products as opposed to locally manufactured goods. But I think this is the role of the intermediary associations such as the Federation of Women in Business in Zambia. It's to identify which are the low-hanging fruit. So we looked at the products that are so much required and yet they can be locally manufactured. And I gave a very good example of cassava flour, which is used in so many industries. We sampled 5 local industries. 2 that actually make cardboard boxes, and all they use to stick that paper together is cassava flour. We also looked at 2 that are into adhesive manufacture. And we looked at 1 that is in confectionery. And we looked at how much of the product that they consume per week. And then we asked them, where do they get it from? And we then asked them, if we gave you a sample and it compared favorably with what you're importing, would you buy locally? And they said, yes, if you're able to produce in large enough quantities. So that was the starting point. The starting point is to actually find the off-takers. And once you do that, you work backwards to create a product of the quality that is required by the off-takers. We also have taken very great advantage of the COVID pandemic era, where we being an import-oriented country, up to now, we had to depend so much on imported products. And then suddenly, all our people that we import from are shut down. They are locked down, and we can't get anything out of them. And so we started to push a buy local campaign, anchored on the Zambia Association of Manufacturers Proudly Zambian campaign. So it's all about also working on the minds of the end users, the consumers of these products, showing them that a local product can be as good as, and in some instances, even better than imported product. I think it's also about choosing which battles you can fight. The other use for the cassava is in the mining industry, and Zambia is a mining country. And we discovered that the local mines need so much cassava starch. And we started to push that agenda as well. There are so many things that can be done. So the resource profiling becomes very, very critical. It's not everything that's going to end up a star in the market. You have to look at what can we win, which battles can we just take on and win them. So the role of intermediary associations, women entrepreneur associations, women's clubs play a very vital role in helping the women to get access to these markets.
Thanks very much, Maureen. I'll ask you also to comment on the first question, which asked about women's participation in gender responsive procurement, women's involvement in innovation hubs, or women's recognition in policy, for example, on work-friendly environments, and their participation in the digital economy. Have you any thoughts on that? But thank you, before I ask you to respond on that front, thank you for reminding us of one of our objectives, which was to locate this discussion in post-COVID recovery. Adams, I'll come to you after I've asked Maureen for a response, for your perspectives on local economic development and its part in post-COVID recovery. But Maureen, perhaps you could say something about the way in which policy can be more gender responsive.
Absolutely. This is a big advocacy move, and I think getting more women in positions of leadership in local government is really going to push this agenda, because once you have them there, they have lived the lives that the rest of us are living. Yeah. And so it's an advocacy issue. I mean, for us to even get to the position where the central government decided to give us to go into it, and just making the case for women to be empowered. We have also then pushed for in the public procurement area that women, for example, here in Zambia, we have the Citizens Economic Empowerment Commission, which also does loan facilities, and they are working closely with the Public Procurement Authority to ensure that when women are bidding, are also given a great opportunity to be able to participate successfully in the bids. So it is, I think it goes to show how important it is to strengthen the women's movement, starting from the Commonwealth Women's Organization and down to the regional level, the COMESA Federation of Women in Business. At local level, the Zambia Federation of Women in Business, which is a federation of smaller associations which are all looking to fight for the same cause and working together. It is a movement of women trying to help other women to bring them to a certain level. So yes, there is room for women to work there. We have growing numbers in the digital economy, but there's still more that needs to be done. And I think it all starts again with identifying what are the low-hanging fruits. What is it that we can get going and then grow from there?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maureen. Tom, Adams, it would be good if you could respond to this issue of women's participation in and women's visibility in policy making. There's been a specific question for you about the configuration of the World Bank project and the fact that these kinds of projects emanating from development partners focus very much on project implementation, but perhaps less so on capacity development and strengthening the business infrastructure as a way of institutionalizing LED. How can that set of priorities be addressed so that local economic development and local development partners are more visible?
These projects were not, they didn't come about in isolation. The issues were first discussed in the medium-term development plan of government. It was based on, you understand, those issues discussed in the plan that the government approached the bank to support, you understand, some of this, the government approached World Bank to support some of these projects. We have 2 or 3 of those projects, you understand, currently ongoing supporting SMEs, you understand, for development. And the way the projects are structured, as you can see, the way the projects are structured, it's clear that SMEs will certainly benefit from that. If I could take an example of like the smallholder commercialization project. The smallholder commercialization project supports agribusiness farmers, linkages and SMEs along agricultural value chain and create markets for access improvement and build capacity support for state and non-state institutions and producer organizations. Like one of the model under this project is the outgrower, I think the outgrower producer scheme. This is a situation wherein small farmers who come together into groups, understand, and they have access to finances, you understand, to develop their farms, produce the agricultural programs. And at the end of the day, you understand, those intermediary institutions that to which those funds pass to the farmers, at the end of the day, there are programs to recover those funds in kind, not in cash, based on what the farmers produce. There are ongoing for them. But my concern with those projects, the extent to which the councils or the local authorities tap into those projects to support their own SMEs, notwithstanding the World Bank project. Even as a government, like I stated, governments have made principal pronouncements how to empower local businesses in their local jurisdictions. Like the example I mentioned, that for contracts that are worth less than $50,000, it's a policy statement that those contracts should be accessed by local businesses, and that the local authority should develop guidelines, for instance, to determine what we call residents. That's for small businesses.
Adams, we're having difficulty picking up what you're saying. You're breaking up intermittently. Could you turn your camera off? That might help. Let's try that.
Okay, so what I'm saying, I say with the World Bank.
Please proceed. Please go ahead.
These are projects I didn't come in isolation.
You are clear.
Hello? I said with the World Bank, am I clear? I said with the World Bank projects, these are taking plan 2019 to 2023, based on the challenges I identified. So the government approached the World Bank to support you understand, to provide projects supporting mostly grants to support projects in that nature, to strengthen SMEs access to finance through like the smallholder commercialization project, to set up support and equipment business training centers for SMEs, because those I would say those preliminary things have to be first in place before giving access, before SMEs gain access to finance. Capacity building issues have to be in place to ensure that the SMEs, when giving finance, will be able to utilize those funds for which they are created. So those World Bank projects are like supporting government initiatives to strengthen SME operations, you understand, in the localities. But the extent to which even the local authorities that have responsibility to deliver services and provide LED in their localities, the extent to which they are involved in this project, it's yet to be determined. But still, notwithstanding, government with its own resources have made policy statements on how local authorities should be involved in supporting SMEs for development in their localities. Like one of the examples I gave has to do with, like, in the 2020 budget, it was stated that all contracts that are worth less than $50,000 should only be accessed by businesses that are resident in the localities. So these are always government is supporting the local authorities to ensure SMEs are empowered, you understand, to gain access to finance in their localities and bring them development, create the necessary jobs to enhance development in their localities.
Thank you very much, Adams. Colleagues, at this point, I'm going to ask our colleagues from the Commonwealth Local Government Forum's Africa programs to provide some maybe commentary on what they've heard so far. I'll ask first Ms. Nyasha Simbangevi from the CLGF's regional program in Southern Africa to give us some observations, and then I'll ask Joyce Ikuful from the West African program to comment. Nyasha, perhaps you could give us some perspective from where you sit.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vijay. From where I sit, I think it was really refreshing to hear from colleagues sharing their experiences from the other regions of Africa, but also particularly hearing from the private sector, and especially the voice of women. And it really got me to think about the work that we've been doing in the region, because I think we've really been trying to do some of the things that they have highlighted needs to be done, especially the role of local government in enabling small to medium businesses. And I think we've also heard from our colleagues in Sierra Leone the importance of actually mandating local government to do that. So my reflections, I think, is really reinforcing some of the work that we've been doing in terms of building the capacity of local governments to facilitate business and local economic development. Also getting local governments to work with their communities through a systematic way of analyzing the local economy, understanding the value chains, and then coming together with solutions to actually address the weaknesses in the local economies. So I think the conversations or the presentations have actually highlighted the importance of the need to support local governments, because we've heard that most of these local the value chains, they start at the local level. You need to get communities to participate in the economy. So the local, I think what I got sitting here is that local governments really need to understand their role in enabling all of this, because obviously we're shifting from a point where local governments were thinking about just delivering, services in terms of just being administering services. From what we've heard, we see the importance that local government needs to play in linking up the small to medium enterprises, the national levels of government, interpreting the policies from the national level and see how they can support people at the local level. And may I also take this opportunity to say that we've been doing some of this work in Botswana. I'm sure we've heard the Reverend say about the work that we've been doing in terms of analyzing the value chains, supporting local governments to actually understand that when they provide services, they need to do it within the context of promoting economic development, not just social development, but also economic development. And they need to partner with their stakeholders, business, communities. And also, I think one of the issues that actually came is for us to really start to think about the role of youth and women in participating in these value chains, because if people don't participate in these value chains, I think we're still going to have growth without, that doesn't change the lives of the people. So the conversations that we've had, I think for me really emphasizes the role of local government. And post-COVID-19 recovery process, I see LED as one of the key strategies that local government, that governments actually in Africa can actually adopt, try and mitigate against the effects of COVID-19. And we can already see that in some of our member countries. I think partners all over the region, Botswana, South Africa, even Eswatini, they've already started to ask us to see whether we can use some of the programming or the support that we have to support the post-COVID-19 recovery process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naisha. Joyce?
Yes. Thank you very much, Vijay. Yeah, so as Nyasha said, I think I was also picking that what we are doing in West Africa is almost similar to what is happening in other parts of Africa. During the presentation of Mr. Adams Tommy, he mentioned what we are doing in Sierra Leone in terms of helping the councils to implement this principle of margin of preference, where at least a percentage of contracts will be left for local businesses. And in Ghana, we are doing a lot in terms of helping our local, the councils that we are working with to also help businesses at the local level to add value to their products and then helping them to have access to markets. I can give the example of what we are doing with the Tema Metropolitan Assembly. We are looking at a fishing community in Tema Newtown, where the people were all along used to this traditional way of drying the small fishes, anchovies, and Atlantic bumper fish, using the traditional way, drying them in the sand, and where it will gather dust and other unhygienic particles. And so we are helping them to have platforms with nets that they can dry them, and also give them machines to mill them into powder form and help them also to package them well so that these products can be found in the supermarkets and not in the local market only, where sometimes chewing the fish becomes a challenge. And so this is something that we are doing with the Tema Metropolis. Also in the north, also working with the women. We formed this women village savings and loan scheme, helping them to, instead of selling their shea nuts in its raw state, processing them into butter so that they can add value to it, and then linking them to markets, taking them to centers that are already more advanced in the process so that they can learn more from that. And so with this discussion that has taken place, hearing that there's partnership need to look out for other institutions that are going already into the process, we just have to reinforce what we are doing at the moment, look out for businesses that or institutions that can help them so that the product can get the necessary market, and we can contribute to the development of our local market. And so I'm happy to be hearing all this, and we hope that the outcome will help us to do more in addition to what we have done so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm going to ask a question to you, Joyce, to you, Naisha, to you, Adams, and to you, Maureen, on the role of local government. We've really talked about local government as maybe more of a regulator and an agent for the strengthening of capacity. We've talked less about local government as an entrepreneur, being more entrepreneurial, maybe focusing much more on improving the business environment, making business easier. Is there anything in your experience that you've seen that comes as perhaps a good example of local government being more entrepreneurial in its outlook? A little bit in the way that the Deputy Governor of Kericho was beginning to tell us. Nyasha, perhaps you've got an example from Southern Africa of the way local government has been more entrepreneurial.
Okay. Thanks very much, Vijay. I wasn't sure I should go into detail, but I think part of what we've been doing in this region, and I actually, when you pointed out that about a month ago, one of the town clerks that we've been working with under the program said that they feel that they are more entrepreneurial in their outlook as a result of the capacity building that we have that we have taken them through. And this is because what we have been trying to do, and I think this is going to cover quite a number of councils that we've been working with in this region, is to try to get councils to understand that they've got a role to play in enabling business and other players to operate within their locality. So what we have done is to build the capacities of local government officials and even elected officials to start to understand what the economy is all about. I know that everybody knew how many wards, how many people, how many schools, but our experience since 2012 doing this work showed us that local authorities did not understand what their economy or what made up their economies. And up to now, we still don't have all of the information, for instance, the data and all of that. But what we've been trying to do in this region with our partners is to get officials to start to understand the economies. Once they do that, they actually come together with their stakeholders, where they come together and then develop a strategy of creating an enabling environment for business, for communities to operate. And what they then do is to identify various projects which are documented in their LED strategy. And then they start to package them. They start to develop business plans around those projects. And we are actually in a process where councils are organizing investment phase so that investors can come and look at the various projects of the various things that can be done within their localities to build their economies. We have actually used methodologies like the value mapping analysis and actually developing the business plan. So as I'm speaking right now, I saw a lot of names of some of the officials that we worked with, and I think you may even want to extend that invitation to talk for themselves. But part of what we're actually doing, we do have people who are sitting on this platform who can actually analyze the value chain, public administrative officials who are actually able to do that. And they do understand that for their district to effectively work or to realize its full potential, they need to do certain things. And that information and that capacity is now sitting within public administrative officials, which it didn't used to be. So that's one of the things that we've done. So right now, I think in Botswana, Zambia, we will be holding investment fairs that are led by local government officials, not people from the business sector. But what I also wanted to say with all of that is that there is need for support. Because to get an official to the point where they say that they are looking at their local authority from a totally different point of view, it requires a lot of investment from a lot of stakeholders, including support and clear mandates from the ministries that are responsible for local government. It also requires a paradigm shift in terms of how we are skilling local government or public officials. I think we need to have our universities starting to offer courses around the economics of public administration. And I think we do have University of Botswana on this platform because we have been trying to get the universities in the various countries that we're working to actually now revise their curriculum to take care of this need for local government officials or government officials to become entrepreneurs and to be leading the economic development in their localities. There is a lot to share, and I'm quite happy to share, in detail the projects and the processes after the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nash. Joyce, do you have any perspectives on ways in which local government is perhaps being a bit more entrepreneurial in West Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my first point supports what Nyasha said about the development of local economic development strategies and implementing them at the local council level. So far, with the councils that we are working with, all of them have that. So they know the areas that they have advantage in, that they can promote. Maybe a farming community into cassava farming, palm, oil palm. So they will take advantage of that and then see how best they can promote that within the council. And that is also taking place in West Africa. And also promoting business advisory services. In Ghana, we have these centers within all the districts. At the national level, we have the National Board for Small Scale Industries that coordinates these centers, but all districts are having these business advisory services centers. So they are there to give the necessary information to medium, small scale businesses. So if these centers are there to help all the businesses, then they will be able to go ahead and then get the confidence to do what is expected of them, especially after the COVID, during this COVID season. These centers are working very hard, giving the necessary support financially, technically to the businesses, so that they will be able to take advantage of the little product that they are producing and be marketable in the system. And so these are some of the things that our MMDAs are doing to be entrepreneurial in the system in Ghana. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Joyce. Colleagues, I'm going to ask our two panelists, Maureen and Adams, to give us their key takeaways. Because I said at the outset what we wanted to use this session for was to help inform some of CLGF's recommendations that can be said to come out of the report. So, Adams, I'm going to ask you to give us your key takeaway first. In doing so, I would really appreciate your take also on the role of local economic development in shaping public-private partnerships, given your perspective from a macroeconomic vantage point.
Well, to start with, just a short one, taking away from what Joyce was saying. There was a pilot, the question he asked was important, stating that to which extent the local authorities should be seen as entrepreneurs, not facilitating process. UNDP was implementing the pilot project, a LED pilot project, wherein at some point they empowered the local authorities. I think it was a pilot in 4 councils. Some local authorities did guest houses and those sort of things, and they were testing things to see how they will be able to effectively manage those facilities for businesses. I think one of the councils, Kenima district councils, went into a PPP arrangement, public-private partnership arrangement at that stage, but the outcome of it wasn't actually encouraging. So it was then maybe the councils see themselves as not standing in actually as entrepreneurs, but they can facilitate, you understand, the process to ensure that existing entrepreneurs within their localities gain the necessary finances to bring development in their localities. Now I'll go back to the takeaway. What I have in mind and what I've been thinking is this: there are still existing structures local councils could use to empower entrepreneurs, depending on the country context. Like in Sierra Leone, the National Public Procurement Act make provision for margin of preference. Margin of preference wherein a particular local council can decide in the particular year that all contracts that will be awarded to SMEs that are residents in localities. Because the situation now is when big contracts went through the decentralization system, when central government sent funds to the councils, you see big SMEs will be leaving Freetown to chase those funds in those localities. So at the end of the day, it's like government just transferring funds to localities and companies coming out of the localities to access those funds and return back to the big city. So there are provisions, you understand, in regulations to ensure that when funds go to a particular locality, those funds should be accessed by businesses in those localities. I think, and the councils, the local councils have a key role to play on that. If the government is serious about that, the local councils too have to be serious to ensure that most of the funds that circulate within their localities should be accessed by businesses that are residents in those localities. Because when a business is resident in the locality, that business will be paying tax to the local councils. That business is going to be monitored to ensure that the jobs will be created, the jobs will be accessed by residents in those localities. This is what brings about local economic development within a particular locality. And going forward, if for instance, the councils have created a platform wherein businesses have the opportunity to access funds from their councils, the councils too will have a leverage on the businesses to ensure that they employ, even if their own relatives. Yeah, so these are things that we should encourage to ensure that as businesses access funds from the councils, the businesses too will be given conditions that, for instance, a council will say, for a business to access, to get funds from my council or to get a contract from my council, you should show evidence that you've employed one or two personnel based on your submissions. And the only evidence with that is to show that you are paying NACIT for the person, even if it's your relative, your brother or sister. But there should be evidence that you employed that person and that person is on payroll. This is how we can create the necessary jobs in those localities that will give back to the localities, and the funds go to councils to stay with the businesses in those councils. But even when businesses leave the capital city, Freetown, they will have residents, they will be registered with those councils, and it will be difficult for them to move easily out of those localities. So if they go into those localities, they will create that platform to stay in that localities, and it will be far more cheaper for them to employ the labor needed in that localities that bring in staff from the cities, you understand, to work in those localities. So for me, I think that's something we've started initially, but at some point to break off. And with time, I think these are things I believe that will be done using the existing structures, and the existing policies and guidelines that are in force.
Thank you very much, Adams. Maureen, can I ask you for your key takeaway?
Thank you so much. I think my key takeaway this afternoon is that really local government has a much bigger role to play than just service provision, and that most of this bigger role can be done through their service provision. They are the ones who do the schools in the localities. They can create those family-friendly places for women to take their children. They do everything. They provide all the services. So it's in their best interests to make sure that the bigger portion of the population are well taken care of, and they can then contribute more meaningfully to the local economy. I think it's also very important for local government entities to seriously look at partnerships in the way that they are providing their services. And LED, I think, has to be a more systematic approach, in the sense that you need to create partnerships between the local government, the central government, private sector players, the social networks. And when you put all that together, I think we're going to get what we're trying to achieve. That's my takeaway.
Thanks very much, Maureen. Well, colleagues, I'm going to draw this part of the session to a close by just highlighting some of the key points that have been made. I think Maureen's last point is an excellent place to start. The role of local government in local economic development might start with service provision, but it shouldn't end with service provision. It's an important role to play in terms of enabling market entry, particularly with sectors of the community that are having difficulty in accessing capital, whether that's women or young people. I think the second point to make is that we've seen the importance and value of value chain mapping. The example that we had that Maureen gave of looking at the ways in which cassava can be looked at again and assessed, product development, marketing, exploring the opportunities for local producers to bring value closer to producers, the opportunities afforded by technology in particular. And I think there's a third point around the role of development partners. And Adams was talking a bit about this, the role of development partners, perhaps to focus more on developmental outcomes than outputs, focus more on the developmental impact of interventions and initiatives rather than project management and delivery. For my part, colleagues, it only remains for me to thank colleagues at the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, both the colleagues that you've seen in front of the camera, but also the ones that have been behind the scenes making this happen. I want to thank our speakers for enriching the conversation and adding these perspectives. But I also want to thank you. We're delighted that we've had more than 60 people participate on this call, which gives an insight into the enthusiasm generated during this Entrepreneurship Week and this particular Commonwealth initiative. With that, colleagues, I'm going to hand over to colleagues at the Commonwealth Local Government Forum to finish the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay. And I think I'd like to just echo those thanks, and to turn that really to say thank you to you for the excellent work in terms of authoring the paper, and thank you to colleagues involved in programs and projects who have actively contributed to the document. I'd like to leave us just with one further takeaway, which is actually around a word that we've mentioned a lot in this conversation, which is actually around the word partnership. And I think that there's a lot that we need to focus on in terms of our work on local economic development towards turning some of the partnerships that we talk about into a reality. And I think we all understand and we recognize that actually making partnerships effective is a huge challenge, and it's a major issue for local government. It's something that local government has to do in almost all of the work that it does. And I think that there's definitely some valuable learning to come from the work that we've been doing on local economic development around building those meaningful partnerships, those inclusive partnerships, and partnerships that do the thing that local government does best, which is really reach some of those parts that other actors and other people can't reach. So maybe just in my final kind of remarks, I just want to leave you with one or two thoughts. The first is that we're going to be running this same event in the Caribbean, and then that word partnership again, in terms of strengthening our partnership with the Commonwealth Secretariat. We're looking at doing a joint Commonwealth event on local economic development as a driver for trade in the Commonwealth. So we'll be sending around more information to colleagues who would be interested in joining that dialogue and making sure that that's widely available. And I think that one of the things that we want to use these consultations with our members and partners for is to make sure that what we're doing is really highlighting your voice as local governments in some of those intergovernmental discussions around trade, around economic development, around governance and development across the Commonwealth. So we will be committing to taking some of the recommendations from the paper and from the conversations that we've heard here and sharing those and making sure that those are reflected in the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which will be taking place in Rwanda in 2021. We'll be doing that with a whole range of Commonwealth partners, and we'll be linking that very closely to work that we're already doing on sustainable urbanization and thinking particularly about the role of local economic development and trade in terms of building sustainable urbanization. We are in dialogue with the United Nations Development Programme about introducing some dialogue at the World Local Economic Development Forum on this thematic of local economic development and trade, and we hope that our members will be participating actively in that event, which will be taking place next year in May. And I think also, just finally, from CLGF's point of view, we are very committed to making local economic development a really central plank in our support to our members in the post-COVID-19 period and post-COVID-19 recovery. We heard from Nyasha and we heard from other colleagues around the table that many governments are building local economic development into their recovery strategies, and we stand ready to work with our partners to reinforce and support that work. And very much, just very finally from my side, the very last point is to say that as an organization, we're always looking to learn, we're always looking to deliver better and support our members as effectively as we possibly can. So when we finish and we sign off from this webinar, we're going to be sending everybody a very short evaluation survey, and we'd be very, very grateful if you could take a couple of minutes to complete that document and email it straight back to us, because that then makes sure that the next event that we run really is tailored to the kind of needs of our members and partners. And we're very happy to continue this conversation on an ongoing basis. Many of you on the call we're already working with, but if we're not, do feel free to stay in touch with us and to continue this conversation. And I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy day to contribute and to participate in this event. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.